Hi everybody, welcome to CriminaliTy. Today we're going to be talking about the case of missing mom, Suzanne Morphew from Salida, Colorado. She went missing on Mother's Day, May 10th of 2020, and as of the date of this video, she still has not been found, nor has anyone been held accountable for her disappearance. Here we go. Suzanne and Barry Morphew grew up in the same hometown of Alexandria, Indiana, and they met in high school. Suzanne was said to be very popular and Barry very well liked and a star baseball player. The couple began dating after Barry graduated high school. They got married in 1994 and Barry had started his landscaping business. And Suzanne was a school teacher who ultimately ended up leaving her job so she could be a stay-at-home mom for her and Barry's two daughters. In approximately 2018, they decided it was time for a change and decided to head west and moved to Colorado. So in the early morning hours of Sunday, May 10th, 2020, also Mother's Day, Barry Morphew, who was a landscaping contractor, got out of bed at approximately 4:30 in the morning, got ready, headed to Broomfield, a couple hours away from where their home was located in Salida, Colorado, to prepare for a job that was apparently starting on Monday. And according to Barry, when he left for Broomfield, his wife, Suzanne Morphew, was asleep in their bed. Throughout the day, as it was Mother's Day, Barry and their two daughters were trying to get a hold of Suzanne to wish her happy Mother's Day and just in general make sure she was doing okay and just check in. Nobody could get a hold of Suzanne, and that began to concern a lot of people. Suzanne was 49 years old and by all means a very healthy and fit woman, but she had survived two battles with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma over the years, and the family was concerned that something could be wrong. So Barry told his daughters to contact the neighbors and have them go to the house to see if they could check on Suzanne and find anything. One of the neighbors does go over and sees that Suzanne's vehicle is still inside of the garage. Suzanne had recently taken up a great interest in mountain biking, and one of the bikes was missing. They knew that she didn't travel far from her home without a vehicle or without some assistance. And the area where the home is located in Salida, it's pretty rough terrain. So the neighbor and her husband end up calling law enforcement to get some help. They began to search the roads and on the sides of the roads just to see if they could find anything, any clue of where Suzanne had gone.
Suzanne? Suzanne?
Ultimately, they do end up finding her bike down the side of a hill in a ravine. It's kind of mangled, but there's still no sign of Suzanne. When they show up at the house, one of the daughter's boyfriends is there trying to find any clues to help find his girlfriend's mom, because he had received a text from his girlfriend stating, "I'm just so sad. My sister and I texted mom for Mother's Day and she still hasn't answered. And I'm scared her and dad probably got in a big fight." A few things that the daughter's boyfriend mentions become quickly relevant to the officers that are searching for Suzanne.
Yep, so the two daughters are gone right now at the moment. The dad is in Denver for a job, and they text her because of Mother's Day, and they haven't heard. The text never went through, like it never delivered since this morning. And she's a big mountain biker. She normally takes her car, and her bike's normally in the back of that. It's gone.
Was this open when you came here?
The neighbor was here that opened it, and then she shut it, and she went back to her house. Her house is right over there.
Okay.
And then I came back, and I opened it to come in the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you looked in the house?
I have, yep.
All right. You looked through everything?
Yes.
You haven't found her?
No.
Okay. All right. What time did you get here?
6 o'clock, and then I went all the way up Frusis, because she's road up there. And I just drove the main road, couldn't find her, and then there's a couple spots that I could check, like trails and stuff, but I wanted to come back here to just, like, check back in and stuff.
Okay, has she ever gone up 225?
Colorado Trail right there?
Like, you know the big hill once you come off the highway?
Well, she hasn't, and I haven't checked there yet because that climb at the beginning is really hard, and I think that it would be out of characteristic for her to do that, but I mean, someone needs to go there, I think.
Why would you say this, like on camera?
Well, because it's kind of a crazy,
Okay.
it's kind of a crazy climb to get up there. It's like not really rideable. You got to push your bike before you can start riding.
All right.
Yeah.
This officer finds that interesting and radios in to his fellow officers saying that the boyfriend does not think that Suzanne would be riding up that trail.
This is one of the daughter's boyfriend. And he's saying it'd be out of ordinary for her to travel up that way when we found the bike.
And the young man soon realizes the importance of the information he just gave when his father shows up to the house and states they just found Suzanne's bike on the road that he just told officers was out of character for Suzanne to take.
You guys have her bike though?
Yeah, we do.
But not her.
Not her.
Okay.
Where'd you find her bike?
Off of that road that I was asking you about.
Oh,
Why you said it was
in
on
Chavano.
Just
As the officer continued to ask questions, one answer in particular was definitely of interest.
Well, this is a weird question, but do Barry and Suzanne get along pretty well?
You can answer honestly.
You know, I think they've had some problems.
Okay.
Yeah, in the past.
Like, just normal.
Normal husband and wife type deal. I
Oh,
would
they
say.
like talk about separating or anything
They
like
have,
that?
yeah.
Okay.
I would, yeah.
And you know this through.
Through
Macy.
Yeah, I'm very
Macy.
close with her.
Yeah.
Barry drives back down from Broomfield and meets with the officers near the scene of where Suzanne's bike was found. He, on the other hand, has a very different story about why Suzanne would have been mountain biking on that road.
Hey, Barry. Besides, I know the bike was here, but what are some of the paths that, or like the trails, like places?
She rides this road. She rides up to the top, and then she goes up to Fooses.
Okay,
If there's no
Fooses.
snow, she'll go up high on Fooses. She's went down this one a couple times.
Down this one here too.
Yeah.
Okay. So double check Fooses over there too, because I think
Well,
more
see,
than
if
Miles.
there's
I think
bikes-
Miles. Yeah, I know. We just want to double check everything.
So according to Barry, it was very common that Suzanne would be biking on these trails up this really steep incline that the daughter's boyfriend said she would have had to have walked her bike up. Who knows? But the next interesting thing is when the officers begin to speak with each other and realize that Barry is saying the last time he saw Suzanne was when he left that morning, and as the officers have tried to locate Suzanne's cell phone, it hasn't pinged since the same time.
What's the thing about 4 o'clock in the morning? Was that
That's the last
somebody on the
time her
phone?
phone.
5 o'clock. Oh yeah, so we pinged the phone and it said the last activity was at 4 in the morning.
Up here?
It's off of the Ponzi Tower. So there's not any specific coordinate. Hey,
The search efforts would continue with drones and scent tracking dogs, and within a couple of days, Suzanne's family put out a reward for $200,000 for her safe return. The store manager at the Pancha Market said that she had talked to Barry on May 12th, and he had come in the store, took a receipt, and on the back just wrote down a description of what Suzanne was wearing, or what he thought she might have been wearing the day she went missing. It was an odd encounter, the manager recalls, because he didn't describe Suzanne at all. Didn't talk about the color of her hair, didn't talk about the color of her eyes, how tall she was, or anything. By May 13th, her bike helmet was found not far from her house, but still no Suzanne. On May 17th, the Pueblo County Sheriff's Office dive rescue team started to search the water sites. And Chaffee County Sheriff's Office was asking all residents to preserve any and all video footage between the dates of May 8th and May 12th, in hopes of seeing if that would give them a clue. Also on May 17th, Barry made a plea to the public for his wife's safe return.
Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you, we miss you, your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you. I want you back so bad.
On May 22nd, investigators with the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and the FBI all were conducting a search at a residential property on the east side of Salida at a property that had been a previous work site of Barry's, and unfortunately nothing found was confirmed to be connected to the disappearance of Suzanne. As the world continued to search for Suzanne Morphew, her husband basically stayed silent until August, when he did an interview with a reporter named Lauren Scharf. And during that interview, he talked about what he thought actually happened to his wife and blamed the police for screwing up the investigation. He suggested that Suzanne was possibly attacked by a wild animal, a mountain lion, specifically. He also theorized that maybe she had run into somebody who was in the midst of a bad deed and she got caught in the middle of it. He states that he and his wife have been in love since 1988 and that she is the love of his life. He states that he promised his and Suzanne's daughters that he would never give up searching. He fears that what is out there is not true because people don't actually know what happened, but they're going to think whatever they're gonna think. By the end of September, Suzanne's brother, Andrew Mormon, had put together a volunteer search team to go to Salida and the surrounding areas to search for any clues on where his missing sister could possibly be. The search that Andrew put together included hundreds of volunteers, and during the time that they were searching, they did come across something they deemed to be very significant. And Andrew ended up going on the Dr. Phil show to discuss this.
Well, we were fortunate enough to have search dogs in from Missouri and another set from New Mexico yesterday. And we made a little discovery. The dogs hit in a particular area, which we turned over to the FBI now.
I hate to ask this, but are these scent and hunting dogs? Are these cadaver dogs? What type of training do these dogs have?
A cadaver.
What kind of area did they hit on?
Well, one of them's a riverfront. Another one is a tree planting. And the third one is an addition being put in, and the entrance area with blocks.
Unfortunately for Andrew and the rest of Suzanne's family and friends, the alerts by the cadaver dogs were never confirmed to have anything to do with the disappearance of Suzanne. By October, a private dive team came in and searched some of the local waterways and mine shafts, which unfortunately also did not result in finding Suzanne. On May 5th of 2021, almost exactly a year after Suzanne had gone missing, Chaffee County District Attorney Linda Stanley made the decision to have Barry Morphew arrested in the disappearance of his wife, Suzanne Morphew. Barry was charged with first-degree murder, tampering with a deceased human body, tampering with physical evidence, and possession of a dangerous weapon, as well as an attempt to influence a public servant.
My name is Linda Stanley. I'm the District Attorney for the 11th Judicial District, which includes Fremont County, Custer, and Chaffee counties total. I wanted to say that thanks for being here for everybody, and there's a couple of things I'd like to address about this case. First, the investigation is still ongoing. Suzanne, her body has not been found, and we're still looking into that. The investigation is ongoing. Second, Barry Morphew is presumed innocent until proven guilty. That's important to remember. Lastly, I wanted to say that today is a good day. And today is a good day for Suzanne. As far as I'm concerned, today is all about Suzanne.
In August of 2021, the public would begin to learn more details of what the state of Colorado had as evidence against Barry Morphew during his preliminary hearing, also known as a proof evident presumption great hearing. And the district attorney's office really wasted no time in trying to lay out everything they had against Barry, while at the same time Barry's attorneys were trying to flip the script and push the narrative that Suzanne was essentially a gone girl scenario. Since Suzanne had been missing, there had been a lot of rumors that Barry had been having multiple affairs, and from the time they lived in Indiana to the move out to Colorado, some even speculating that the move to Colorado was an attempt to save their marriage from Barry's infidelities. Well, during the first day of the preliminary hearing, the public actually learned that Suzanne was having an affair. This was quite shocking. She had been secretly messaging and seeing a gentleman named Jeff Libler that she knew from high school that she had reconnected with via Facebook approximately 2 years earlier, and was still talking to him up until the day before she was reported missing. So the defense was really pushing that she decided to leave and just disappeared. Well, the prosecution, on the other hand, was laying out a very different narrative of what they believe happened to Suzanne and how Barry was responsible for her untimely demise. The prosecution discussed how Barry and Suzanne's marriage was riddled with accusations of infidelity, as well as financial struggles from the move to Colorado while they still owned a home in Indiana and having to pay both mortgages. Just the overall control issues that they believed that Barry exhibited based on text messages that Suzanne had sent to her friends and family. The prosecution brought out text messages to Suzanne's best friend Sheila from all the way back in November of 2018. And Suzanne is sharing with Sheila the struggles that she's having with Barry, who she refers to as B, and just talking about the fact that he is noticing a change in her and that she's becoming more independent and not checking in on him as often. And she continues to share details with Sheila about the relationship and where her mind is in regards to the marriage and her children. And she confides in Sheila that she thinks that Barry is talking to their older daughter and sharing too much of their relationship information with her, and she can tell by the way that the older daughter approaches her about her own marriage. She also discusses that her youngest daughter can tell that there's definitely issues going on, and that she fears that it's going to cause damage to her own relationship with her daughters because of Barry being as manipulative as he is with them. She thinks that Barry just wants her to be a puppet and wants her to do the things that he wants her to do when he wants her to do them. She discusses that she does believe that Barry is living some form of secret life, and she's beginning to become more afraid for her own safety, and she fears that when the girls are gone is when she's in the most danger. She believes that when the youngest daughter does leave for college, that she won't be able to stay there because she won't feel safe any longer. She shares that Barry uses money and talks about the house and the Range Rovers and all the things that he does to provide for her, and like, how could she not appreciate him? She feels like it's a constant battle between her and Barry to just have a healthy marriage. She says that they've discussed separating, but it's more in innuendos versus actually coming out and saying it. She calls him Jekyll and Hyde, that she just doesn't know what she's going to get when he walks in the front door. She talks about that everything just kind of changes with the wind. He thinks it's great as long as he's getting what he wants. As time goes on, you can tell that there are more conversations about divorce and separation and what that would look like for both her, Barry, and their daughters. She wants it to be as peaceful as possible. She doesn't want to fight. On May 9th, 2020, the day before Suzanne was reported missing, she and Sheila were messaging, just discussing general things such as an upcoming wedding and Sheila's own mother's health. Sheila would later say that was the last conversation she ever had with Suzanne. The prosecution goes on to show a message that Suzanne had sent to her sister on Friday, May 8th, talking to her about the relationship issues and stating that it's just been really hard and he's so abusive emotionally and physically. Suzanne just tells her sister that she's upset with herself for allowing it for so long. Then the prosecution shows messages between Suzanne and Barry, some which had been deleted from Barry's phone, where Suzanne's accusing him of having a mistress and still trying to manipulate her. And just days before Suzanne went missing, she texts Barry, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years." She says she just wants to figure the whole thing out civilly and move on. These messages all lead investigators to start looking at a different timeline of when Suzanne actually disappeared. And some of the most important messages were to the man she was having an affair with, Jeff Libler. And Suzanne and Jeff had originally started talking on Facebook Messenger, but since they were both married, they opted to use other apps to communicate, and at one point had even taken a break from communication altogether. Suzanne had reached back out to Jeff on LinkedIn when she wanted to reconnect, and she was just sharing with him how rough the marriage was and how much she missed him, and she knew that he was the one that she was supposed to be with, that he was her love. And on Saturday, May 9th of 2020, the day before Suzanne was reported missing, one of the last messages she ever sent from her phone was to Jeff at approximately 2 p.m. in the afternoon. It was a selfie of her sunbathing in her backyard, letting him know that she was available to chat on WhatsApp, and letting him know how deeply in love with him she was. Next, the prosecutors discussed items that they found in the Morphew home, as well as the home itself, which they had now deemed a crime scene. During the search of the house, the investigators had found this spy pen in a walk-in closet in Suzanne's master bedroom. They learned that Suzanne had gotten the pen, which was voice-activated and recorded conversations in hopes of catching her husband Barry having an affair. Instead, she actually recorded conversations between her and Barry where they were arguing about finances and conversations with Jeff Libler. This is how law enforcement was actually able to identify that she was having an affair and who the person was that she was having the affair with. Inside the Morphew's dryer, investigators had found a clear plastic cap that was from a syringe that's used to load a tranquilizer dart, which they believe that Barry used a tranquilizer gun with the dart injected with chemical to shoot Suzanne to incapacitate her. Barry told the investigators he had no idea how the cap had gotten into his dryer, but he did say that he was an experienced tranquilizer gun shooter because he was an avid hunter and used load darts with paralyzing chemicals to illegally sedate deer and remove their antlers to sell. When investigators were searching the Morphew home and they were in the master bedroom, they found an unspent .22 round on the floor. Barry says he has no idea how that got there. And then they noticed a large crack in the master bedroom door frame. When they asked Barry what happened, he said he had no idea. When they contacted the prior owners of the home, they stated that there was no crack in that door frame when they sold the house to the Morphews. This led investigators to believe that once Barry had shot Suzanne with the tranquilizer gun, that she had gone to the master bedroom and locked herself in, and he had broken in the door, busting that door frame to get to her. As with most of Barry's stories, they continued to evolve as investigators were approaching him with new evidence that they had found, like the data from his truck, as well as the data from his cell phone. If you recall earlier in the video, I talked about that Saturday, May 9th, Barry had gone to work on the other side of Salida with one of his employees named Morgan. And Morgan mentioned that Barry had been acting very weird. At 9:50 a.m. on Saturday, Barry texts Suzanne like, "Hey, you want to go on a hike?" Suzanne responds with "Where?" but Barry's at work and does not respond back. So at 10:36 a.m., Suzanne ends up texting Barry again, saying, "Do you want to meet up to hike?" Approximately 10 minutes later, Barry responds with, "No, I'm coming home," and Suzanne asks him to pick up stuff for the hot tub. And Morgan later said that Barry did end up leaving work that day around 11 a.m., even though she was under the impression they were going to be at this work site all day. And this work site is the same work site that law enforcement had gone and dug up. So Barry arrives home at about 11:45 a.m. And about 5 minutes later, his phone is pinging down by the river. So when investigators ask him about why his phone would be down by the river, he says that he was actually searching for a turkey that one of his daughters had shot some time ago. At 1:38 p.m., Barry ends up leaving the house again, and this is when Suzanne sends the text to Jeff Libler, letting him know that she's alone again. At 2 p.m., Barry was replacing a blade on what is known as a bobcat. It's a piece of machinery that he used in his landscaping business. This is actually the only thing that Barry admits that he was untruthful about to investigators because he states that he just couldn't remember the time that he was actually working on a quote-unquote mechanical thing that had to do with the bobcat, and that he had just been informed that his wife was missing, so he wasn't thinking clearly about what was happening. But he never specifically states that he was having his blade replaced. While Barry is gone getting the bobcat blade replaced is when Suzanne sends the last known messages from her phone, when she tells Jeff that she's going to be available on the WhatsApp and sends him a selfie. Barry arrives home at approximately 2:44 p.m. and his phone seems to be running around the house. When asked about this by Special Agent Johnny Grusing, his response was that he shoots chipmunks, and he shot approximately 85 of them. And it should be noted that Barry never brought up the fact that he had run around shooting chipmunks or going to check for a decomposing turkey when reviewing the timeline of the few days leading up to Suzanne being reported missing, until months later when interviewed for the umpteenth time. Barry's attorneys argued that the phone pinging on different towers outside of the house and bouncing back and forth, making it seem like it was running around, could have very well just been the way the cell phone was pinging off the towers. It did not mean that Barry was actually running around. And when Agent Grusing was asked that on the stand during the preliminary hearing, his response was, well, that's why we asked him. And he said he was chasing chipmunks. At 2:47 p.m., Barry puts his phone into airplane mode, which it would stay there in airplane mode until about 10 o'clock that night. During this time, Suzanne is actually getting texts and responses from people such as Jeff Libler, and she is not responding back to them. At 4:44 p.m., Barry's truck doors open and close. And I was trying to confirm if this is the time that he actually goes to the store to buy the supplies for the hot tub. I could not verify that. If you happen to know, please leave a comment and let me know where I can find if that is the time that he goes. So according to Barry's initial stories, he stated that he had gone home and spent the day with Suzanne, and they had steak dinner and were intimate that night, and that they went to bed about 8 p.m. But his truck data actually shows that he was opening and closing the doors to his truck throughout the evening. Specifically at 9:24 p.m., he starts his truck and actually backs it up in the driveway closer to the house. And Suzanne's phone actually has some interesting activity throughout the evening and into the early hours of May 10th of 2020, where she had sent a handful of friend requests to men back in Indiana on Facebook, and then there was some incoming and outgoing calls in the middle of the night. When Agent Grusing was asked about these calls when he was on the stand, he said that Verizon noted that Suzanne's last phone activity was Saturday, May 9th in the afternoon, and they did not have these calls from the middle of the night. From 3:25 a.m. until 3:49 a.m., Barry's truck doors are opened and closed repeatedly. At 4:23 a.m., it's the last known ping from Suzanne's phone off of a Poncha Springs tower. And at 4:31 a.m., Barry turns his phone back to airplane mode. And according to Barry's initial statements, he says that he woke up at 4:30 in the morning. He was pulling out of his driveway by 5 a.m. Suzanne was asleep in her bed, and he was headed to Broomfield to prepare for this job starting on Monday. His phone is actually pinging near the location of where the bike was found. This on its face is not actually alarming, because the way that he would have to leave his residence is through these swirling roads that actually go right by where the bike was found. And then he would end up heading east on US 50. But Barry heads west, which is cause for questioning, because west of where the bike was found is where Suzanne's helmet was later located. So to adjust for this inconsistency in Barry's story, he has to make sure that his story evolves to match what the evidence is showing. And he decides to tell law enforcement that he actually saw a bull elk and decided to follow it west on US 50, which would clearly take him out of the way of the trip that he was intending to take. And then at 5:57 a.m., Barry's phone is now receiving signal again as he's driving towards Broomfield. He texts his mom, Happy Mother's Day, and then he texts Suzanne, hey, you up? Happy Mother's Day. I love you. At 8:10 a.m., things start to get very interesting. Barry has arrived in Broomfield, but makes a stop at an RTD bus stop, where he opens and closes his doors and remains there for at least 2 minutes while he is throwing items away. This becomes known as Trash Run number 1. At 8:14 a.m., Barry arrived at the Holiday Inn Express in Broomfield, Colorado. He parked on the south side, which was near a dumpster. This would be identified as Trash Run number 2. At 8:41 a.m., he texted Suzanne, "I've made it to Broomfield." At 8:46, you can see Barry entering his room carrying 2 white trash bags, a khaki backpack, hiking boots, a teal-colored piece of clothing, and a darker black piece of clothing. It should be noted that Barry is currently wearing jeans, boots, and a long-sleeve shirt. I also want to mention that all of the timestamps on the surveillance footage from the hotel is 1 hour off. So just add an hour to get the exact time of day that Barry was seen on camera. At 10:06 a.m., Barry is seen leaving his hotel room carrying a long-sleeve shirt, 2 white bags, and hiking boots. Note that he is wearing jeans, boots, and now a short-sleeve dark shirt. From 10:19 a.m. to 10:41 a.m., Barry drives up and around his work site, but he doesn't stop. He ends up going to McDonald's in Broomfield, where he's seen on camera putting trash into 2 separate trash cans, and he's seen shoving the trash down with both of his hands. This is identified as Trash Run number 3. And Trash Run number 4 takes place immediately after. From 10:47 a.m. to 11:18 a.m., Barry is seen at the Men's Warehouse in Broomfield. His truck doors are opening and closing for approximately 40 minutes. The driver and passenger doors were opened multiple times. At 11:23 a.m., Barry returns to his hotel, and at 11:36, he's seen in the lobby carrying a black binder full of a bunch of messy papers. At 11:56 a.m., Barry leaves the hotel again. Barry is now wearing jeans, boots, and a light-colored or white t-shirt. And from 11:57 to about 12:25, he's at his work site, where he said in his original statement that he spent most of the day. In his evolved statement, he actually claims that he was just there to assess the wall and see what needed to be done. He removed some bricks, and then he returned to his hotel. And another piece of information that's important to note here is that the city of Broomfield actually does not allow any type of construction work like this to be done on Sundays or holidays, which law enforcement would later say Barry was well aware of. And then what would be known as Trash Run number 5, and the last trash run that law enforcement talks about. Although many speculate there were quite a few other trash drops done throughout the city. But Trash Run number 5 happens around 12:36 when Barry returns to the hotel. He's seen on surveillance taking items out of his truck, such as a black container, a large white trash bag, and articles of clothing. He actually sets it down at the curb and then goes back to the truck to grab something else and returns to pick up the items, carries them to the trash, and then at 12:41 p.m., Barry is seen walking back to the hotel with nothing in his hands. At 12:42 p.m., Barry returns to his hotel room and does not leave again until 6:03 p.m., where Barry is now wearing his jeans, his boots, and now a black short-sleeve shirt with his khaki backpack. While Barry was in his hotel room for those few hours, he says to law enforcement that he was just watching TV. And at 3:30 p.m., he texts Suzanne to call him. At 5:15, his neighbors back home are now calling him to report that there's nothing at the house. 5:45, they call again, and Barry leaves his hotel room at 6:03 p.m. When he goes outside of his room, he ends up calling the neighbors back. During these exchanges, Barry had told the neighbors to go ahead and call the police because he was driving home and had really bad signal. But when law enforcement got his phone records, they knew that he was actually still at the hotel the whole time. At 6:06 p.m., Barry pulls his truck to the front of the hotel, and at 6:09, he calls his employee Morgan to let her know that he's going to be leaving and what's happening. At 6:10 p.m., you can see Barry on the lobby surveillance walking and carrying a bunch of hand tools that he ends up asking the desk worker if it's okay to leave there for his workers that will be arriving that night and early the next morning. At 6:12 p.m., Barry leaves Broomfield and heads back to Salida, where he is seen then on the body cam footage near the location of where Suzanne's bike was found. During the interview with Morgan, Barry's employee, she stated that Barry and her had worked together on Saturday, May 9th, and that she was going to go with Barry on Sunday, May 10th at about 5 p.m. to Broomfield to spend the night to work on a project up there the following day. Barry was supposed to pick up Morgan Sunday to drive up there. Barry did not tell Morgan that he was leaving early in the day, and he never came by to pick her up. So when she called Barry to follow up on what was going on, he told her they were going to need additional help, and so she asked Jeffrey Puckett to come up with her. Cassidy Cordova is another employee who was going to be meeting them on Monday morning to work on the job with them. When Morgan and Jeff arrived in Broomfield, Jeff actually checked into Barry's room. There was talk of an overpowering chlorine smell that was in the room. And when Morgan, Jeff, and Cassidy met up at the work site the following day, they realized this was a job that was going to require a bobcat. There was no way they were going to be able to do this job with the hand tools that Barry had left at the front desk. Not to mention, the bricks that were needed still had not arrived to even get the job done. When Barry was asked about all of these things by investigators, he would say that he just could not recall anything that he was throwing away, that he had a very messy truck, which was true, according to the pictures taken by the investigators, and that he just would sometimes throw things away, and he just couldn't recall what they were. He did admit to throwing away some tranquilizer stuff, but that was the only thing he would admit to. When asked about the clothing, or the black container, or any of those things, he just simply said, "I don't recall." And when asked about why his hotel room would have an overpowering smell of chlorine, he said that his room was close to where the pool was located, and maybe that the employees possibly used chlorine to clean because of COVID. It's important to note here that the CBI agents actually went back to the hotel in September of 2020 and checked the room that Barry had been in, and it still smelled like chlorine. So back to the evening of May 10th, after Barry met with officers at the location that Suzanne's bike was found, he goes back to the house with them where they're asking him to locate an article of clothing for scent dogs to be able to use to help find Suzanne. The officers tell him to not touch anything, just in case. He directs them to the master bedroom into the closet where he points out a pair of Suzanne's biking shorts. And next to the biking shorts is actually her biking gloves, which is interesting. If she only had one pair, she would have had them with her, I would think. But she could have had multiple pairs. The officers end up keeping the house as a potential crime scene for approximately 10 days with the first search warrant. During this time, they discover the spy pen, they discover the tranquilizer cap in the dryer, which during the preliminary hearing, we actually learned that the cap is not of a tranquilizer dart, it's actually the cap to the needle of the liquid that is used to fill the dart. We also learned that the cap came back with 2 DNA profiles on it, and Barry's was excluded. They also find that one of the daughters' bed sheets has been stripped off the bed, which they also locate in the dryer prior to finding the tranquilizer dart cap. And the investigators were told to look for 3 books that Suzanne typically had together in the house. One was a Bible, one was an Al-Anon book, and the other was her journal. Investigators did find her Bible and the Al-Anon book, but were unable to locate all of her journals. But in the fireplace, the investigators described material that could potentially be consistent with a journal. Also in the fireplace was a piece of wood that was not firewood, although there was a stack of firewood sitting next to the fireplace, as well as papers that they thought could have been potentially wrapping paper, and 2 pieces of metal, along with something they thought could have potentially been like the binding of a book. In the kitchen, they found a half-drink cup of coffee, which was odd because it hadn't been washed yet. And the defense actually states during the preliminary hearing that Barry doesn't drink coffee, so it had to have been Suzanne's. And in the dishwasher, they found 1 plate. But Barry had said that he and Suzanne had steak on Saturday night. He says they had 1 steak that they split, but there was only 1 plate in the dishwasher, so they ate off of the same plate apparently. Investigators also searched Suzanne's Range Rover, and in there they actually found her Camelback, which is something that she would have used while she was biking it. She keeps her snacks, her drink, so on and so forth inside the Camelback. They also located Suzanne's purse and wallet, and in the wallet was her ID cards, her insurance cards, cash, and the insurance cards were specifically interesting because she actually had an appointment for her cancer treatment the following day on May 11th, and she would have needed her ID to leave, or her insurance cards to go to the doctor, and she took none of that with her. What they were not able to locate, though, was Suzanne's cell phone or her phone charger that she usually kept next to her bed. Both were gone. But the biggest thing that they did not find in the house was blood. And prosecutors had to prove that there was another way that Suzanne couldn't have survived without bloodshed. In Suzanne's Range Rover on the glove box, investigators found male DNA on the glove box in Suzanne's car that actually matched partial DNA profiles found in 3 unsolved sexual assault cases, 1 in Illinois and 2 in Arizona. And this piece of evidence was always a bit of confusion for the public because the DNA found on Suzanne's glove box was a partial match to these 3 unsolved sexual assault cases. I don't recall if we were ever actually told if it was the same partial of the profile that matched all 3, or if it was different pieces of the partial DNA that matched each one. But for the defense, this was important because it showed that there was another person's DNA at the quote-unquote crime scene, and it did not match Barry's. For the prosecution, they essentially explained it away by saying it could have been somebody who had been working on the car, or it could have been, somebody from a car wash, but that there wasn't enough evidence to create probable cause that Suzanne's disappearance was connected to anything to do with this DNA. And Suzanne's bike and her bike helmet, once they were recovered, were also tested for DNA. And Barry's DNA was excluded from any found on the helmet. It was only found on the bicycle seat, which investigators believe was possible that Barry had touched the bicycle on the night of May 10th, near the location where the bicycle was found. In the area where the bike helmet was located, the investigators did find tire tracks, which they took impressions of. Those came back with no connection to any of Barry's vehicles. Barry was interviewed over 20 times by multiple law enforcement agencies in regards to Suzanne's disappearance. And as I talked about earlier, we know that Barry's stories would continue to evolve as law enforcement was approaching him with new evidence. But a couple other things that I want to touch on is during these interviews, Barry would actually make comments referencing Suzanne in the past tense. He would make comments like, "I wish you would have known her," or "known how great she was." But also during this time, Barry is upset with his friends and family and law enforcement for even insinuating that Suzanne is deceased. He believes that she is alive and that she is coming back to him at some point. Another oddity that was important to the investigators during these conversations was when Barry was asked to describe the last time he saw Suzanne, he couldn't really do it. He would go from saying, "I'm not really sure, she was just laying in the bed," or "I didn't see her at all," or "I'm not sure if she got dressed from last night when we were intimate," to "Oh yes, she definitely put on shorts and the tank top." One of the last things he says is that he remembered that she was snoring, but he ultimately would never say exactly what Suzanne looked like that morning when he left for work. And as with many people who find themselves to be the suspect of a homicide, they like to divert the attention of law enforcement by naming another suspect, which Barry, of course, does, and he also is able to throw a little shade at Suzanne while he does it. He decides to tell law enforcement that Suzanne has recently had a history of taking a lot of medication, and that she is using alcohol a lot more frequently than she used to. He also says that she frequently meets up with somebody he refers to as Tim, who becomes known as CBD Tim, to purchase CBD and hemp oil. Investigators meet with Tim and he says, "Yes, I was selling hemp oil to Suzanne," but he ultimately doesn't have anything to do with her disappearance. And when investigators show Barry the selfie that Suzanne actually took and sent to her lover, he decides to say that she looks drunk, like she has drunk eyes. Don't those look like drunk eyes to you? Despite telling law enforcement that him and Suzanne actually had a great night on Saturday before he went out of town, due to the fact that Suzanne was not on any substances and that she was sober. It's also important to mention that during one of the interviews with Johnny Grusing, he asked Agent Grusing for immunity. And if he was to receive immunity, he would open up his life in hopes of helping them to find Suzanne. It doesn't really make any sense for him to ask for immunity if he's not guilty. I don't know what he thought he was going to be able to get in exchange. It's a very odd request for somebody who claims to be so innocent. After 4 days of a preliminary hearing that was held in August of 2021, Judge Patrick Murphy decides on September 17th, 2021, that Barry's case can be bound over for trial. And he cites the following for his reasons that he believes he can find all reasonable inference in favor of the prosecution. He says that there is probable cause that Barry may have committed the murder and tampered with a deceased body. He says that there is 2 motivations for this crime. 1, Suzanne's affair, and 2, Suzanne wanted to file for divorce. But a rather unexpected decision was also given by Judge Murphy. He allowed Barry Morphew to post $500,000 cash-only bond to be released from prison. This did not sit well with many people. So Barry was able to post his bond, but he had to stay in Chaffee County and he had to wear an ankle monitor. Barry and Suzanne's daughters were standing by their dad, as well as his mom. They were typically in the courtroom almost every single day throughout the preliminary hearing and many of the motions hearing that would continue after. The one person we did not see was a lady named Shoshana Dark, who was suspected of dating Barry all the way back to July of 2020. They've denied having a relationship, but they have spent a lot of time together. This brings me to where Judge Patrick Murphy ends up having to recuse himself from the trial. So Shoshana and Barry are friends. She actually went on to Barry and Suzanne's property after it had been sold to collect a package. I'm not quite sure what was in the package, but there had been a lot of speculation that it was some type of supplement. It's called Spark, but I'm not 100% sure that that was ever confirmed. So Shoshana ends up getting charged with trespassing. Well, Shoshana actually knows Judge Patrick Murphy from high school. He cannot reside over her case. So the defense actually files a motion and says, hey, if you can't reside over her case, then you shouldn't actually reside over Barry's either, because she's most likely going to be called as a witness at Barry's trial. So he ultimately has to recuse himself. In January of 2022, there was a 2-day motions hearing brought on by the defense, who was asking the new judge, Judge Ramsey Lama, to dismiss the charges based on what they believed to be corruption in the prosecutor's office, stating multiple discovery violations and Brady violations and untimely release of evidence to the defense team, and an internal investigation that was happening with one of the agents from CBI. Ultimately, Judge Lama rules that he is not going to dismiss the case, but he does side with the defense, requesting that any and all evidence better be given to the defense at this time. It does allow the defense access to all the internal investigation that is happening with Agent Cahill, even though Agent Cahill had been removed from the case quickly after the preliminary hearing. The defense is also stating that one of the prosecutors, who has since retired, is also involved in covering up evidence or not disclosing evidence in a timely manner to the defense team. When the documents are actually released later regarding Agent Cahill's internal investigation, one of the things he actually says about the Morphew case was that he believed that arresting Barry at that time was extremely premature. He did not think that the state had the evidence to back up the claims that Barry had killed Suzanne and disposed of her body. In some of the following motions hearings, Judge Lama ends up ruling that 12 of the 14 expert witnesses that the prosecution has on their list are not going to be able to testify. He cites different reasons for the majority of them. One was a canine handler who had written a report, but that report was never asked for by the prosecution, and it was never delivered to the defense. Another was the tranquilizer expert who was going to testify about what would happen to Suzanne if she had been shot with a tranquilizer. A couple of the witnesses were going to be allowed to testify, but they were not going to be allowed to testify as experts in the field that they were qualified for. This was going to be a very big hindrance on the prosecution's case against Barry Morphew. So in April of 2022, in a very dramatic turn of events, only 2 weeks before Barry was actually set to go to trial, prosecutor Linda Stanley asked the court to dismiss all charges against Barry Morphew without prejudice, so she would be able to try him again if she was able to get more evidence to support the charges. She also states that the prosecutors and the investigators actually have a pretty good indication of where they believe that Suzanne's body is, and that at that current moment, that area was covered in snow and they were not going to be able to search it at that time. So Barry Morphew was technically a free man on April 19th of 2022 and free to go home, free to go anywhere, free to do whatever Barry Morphew wanted to do. And one of the first things on his list was to do an interview with his two daughters on Good Morning America on May 6th, 2022, which was 4 days from the 2-year anniversary of his wife's disappearance.
We've been silent for a long time, and we've decided that we finally want to break the silence. It's been an emotional roller coaster, but we feel like we can finally take our first steps in healing, which is a blessing. And yeah, we just know our dad better than anyone else, and we know he was not involved in our mom's disappearance. We want to heal. We feel like we haven't been able to heal these past 2 years.
I just love my girls, and I love my wife, and I just want her to be found.
I just hope that Linda will step up to the plate and do everything she can to find our mom, because what they've done is not fair, and we're never going to stop looking for our mom.
And one of Barry's attorneys had a few comments of her own that she wanted to add in regards to what she thought of the prosecution.
And if you want to honor Suzanne and you want to honor the daughters, go find Suzanne. Prosecutors need to be held responsible, and they need to pay for the damage they've caused to Barry, which is frankly nearly irreparable, because it's hard for anybody to believe that Barry is not who they claim he was.
Almost a year after the charges were dismissed against Barry Morphew, his attorneys filed a request for an investigation into the Colorado Chaffee County prosecutors, including Linda Stanley. She filed an 83-page affidavit on March 29th of 2023 to show her claims about the dishonesty and the unethical practices of the prosecutor's office. She claims that they were failures to disclose and misleading testimony in an effort to arrest Barry Morphew and try Barry Morphew for a crime that they did not have the evidence to support the charges. She also claims that there was a placement of false and misleading allegations regarding the discovery obligations and documents that were filed in the court. She has multiple things that she cites as her beliefs on why this is a valid complaint and an investigation should be opened.
The Morphew case was dismissed a year ago tomorrow. It has been nearly 3 years since Suzanne Morphew disappeared. And the prosecution keeps claiming that they're gonna find her. Their case was baseless to begin with. Their affidavit they filed was like a tabloid, filled with misrepresentations, false information, and concealed extremely favorable evidence. But they went through a year putting Mr. Morphew behind bars in a cage for 5 months, concealing evidence of innocence.
In May of 2023, Barry Morphew filed a civil suit against the prosecutors of Chaffee County, the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, and the FBI. He is seeking $15 million for the damages he believes were caused by the prosecutors and law enforcement officials. The complaint alleges that the prosecutors, both state and federal law enforcement agencies, conspired to deprive Barry Morphew of his due process rights and his right to be free from seizure, incarceration, deprivation of property, and restrictions on liberty, to fabricate evidence against him, to manipulate witness testimony, to suppress, conceal, and omit exculpatory evidence, to falsify charges, and to conceal the knowing and reckless misconduct, and to protect one another from liability, which ultimately deprived Barry Morphew of his constitutional rights. And near the 3-year anniversary of his wife's disappearance, him and his 2 daughters decide to do another interview.
What have these last 3 years been like for you?
Very, very sad. very confusing.
Just so traumatic. Like, literally, our worst nightmare.
Did you have anything to do with the disappearance of your wife?
Absolutely not. It's very hurtful to lose your reputation and your integrity.
His daughter's standing by him.
You never had a shred of doubt once you heard the evidence from law enforcement against your dad?
I've never had a shred of doubt.
Not one.
Law enforcement, the DAs, believed that they had their guy. And they believe that there's a mountain of evidence against you. There's just not Suzanne's body.
They're wrong. They've got tunnel vision. And they looked at one person, and they've got too much pride to say they're wrong and look somewhere else.
These charges were dropped without prejudice, which means if authorities feel like there's more evidence, they could charge you again. Do you live with fear of that?
Well, I was innocent the first time they arrested me, so I'm sure it's possible. But I don't have anything to worry about. I've done nothing wrong.
Was there any indication before she disappeared that something was amiss?
No.
Did you observe any fights, arguments, disagreements between your mom and your dad that concerned you before?
No.
We had a wonderful life, a wonderful marriage. She was just so loving and giving and such a good mother. And I know that she was going through chemotherapy for the last couple of years before her disappearance, and I know she was going through some hard things and made some bad decisions.
What kind of bad decisions?
She was really having trouble with the chemotherapy and the drugs.
When you found out that Suzanne was having an affair, what was your first thought?
My heart was broke. My heart was broken. I didn't believe it.
What's been the hardest part?
Just not having Mom.
Yeah. Not knowing.
It's really difficult, especially because of the lack of closure we have.
And Barry's attorneys once again took this opportunity to speak to the public.
So I know that 15 million is a huge number, but I don't think that, in my mind, that covers any of the damage that's happened to Barry and the girls.
They know he's innocent, and if they would just look for Suzanne outside of where they hypothesize Barry could have possibly buried her remains, they could find her.
So as we are today, Barry is a free man and free to do whatever Barry chooses to do. Although he does have to live under the cloud of suspicion from most of the world at this point, as well as the possibility of being re-prosecuted in the disappearance of his wife. Ultimately, the most important thing is Suzanne is still missing. Nobody knows where she is. Nobody has found her.